Welcome to this next webinar of the Multifamily Investor Nation. I'm your host, Dan Handford. I'm actually one of the managing partners of a group called PassiveInvesting.com. You can go to PassiveInvesting.com and find out more information about us. I won't spend too much time there. If you want to find out more information about me, you can click on this Meet the Team button here at the top. And when you click on that Meet the Team button, it'll come up with our team members that are part of our team right now. And then you can also click on my name, and there's a video there that I've done that actually explains a little bit about myself and my background and my bio. So I won't spend too much time on the webinar today going over that, but you can also see in this first line, I'm married with my wife, and we have our 4 children, 3 girls and a boy. We have a 10-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old, and we live and work here in Columbia, South Carolina. Actually, it's a city called Irmo, South Carolina, which is where we are right now. But you can find out more information there. You could also, if you're interested in investing with us, you can see our current offerings here. Here's some of our 2 assets that we have that we actually have already closed on the Ascend Waterley project. A little bit left to be able to raise on that one, and then this Blue Water Bolton's Landing is pretty almost full right now too. I think over the weekend we just got the last little bit of commitments on there, but you can check that one out. We also have our 2 funds, a self-storage fund and a debt fund you can check out if you're interested in investing with us. And if you just want to follow us more as an investor, you can click on this blue button here, join the Passive Investor Club, fill out this form, and let us know a little bit about yourself, and one of our investor relations team members will jump on a phone call with you, discuss your investment goals, and see if it's a right fit for you. So let's talk a little bit about this Mfin Summit coming up on January 2022. If you're interested, you can join us. It's on January 20th to the 22nd. It's a 3-day, all online, all virtual event, all things multifamily. And it's a live 3-day event. All the sessions are recorded, so you can go back and watch those at your leisure if you decide to register for the event. So it's only $197. You can go ahead and register for it right now. Just go to mfinsummit.com. Let's go straight into our topic for today, which is apartment syndication and everything around the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission. We're going to be talking about Regulation A and also Regulation D. There are 2 different regulations that we're going to be talking about here. And this, before we get started, I want to share with you a little bit about kind of Regulation A and Regulation D. What's the most popular? Are we talking about, are you allowed to advertise your deal? What are the limits that you can raise? And, should you hire an attorney? We're going to talk about all those things. And then if you're nice and paying attention, I'll maybe even give you a handout. Somehow I'll, for those of you who joined us live, I'll send that to you via the chat box here. Let me actually see if I can find it just real quickly. I just missed it actually. Let's see. There we go. It's a Securities and Exchange Commission table that I have put together. And I'm actually going to share this with you real quick, just so you can actually have this. And it'll be helpful for you as we're going through. Instead of having to take a bunch of notes, you can just take a picture of this on your screen. That's probably going to be the easiest way for me to be able to get this to you. Because it's a little bit harder to get it to you otherwise. Let's first talk about this. So there's 2 different registrations within the SEC regulations. There's Regulation A and there's Regulation Regulation A and Regulation D. Sorry about that. I had a little bit of a faux pas there. I'm not sure why this one email is popping into this box here. It's kind of weird. All right, so we have Regulation A, Regulation D. Regulation A is really set aside and reserved for those who are doing more of a fund, right? And they want to bring in as many non-accredited investors as they want. That's Regulation A. Most people, not most, pretty much everyone does Regulation D when it comes to multifamily syndication. And the reason why is because Regulation D does not require you to submit anything to the SEC and get pre-approval, right? You don't have to get pre-approval for doing a Regulation D offering. Now, you still have to register certain things, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit to make sure that you stay compliant and legal. But and I'll share the chart with you in just a moment. I haven't actually put it on the screen just yet, so bear with me just a minute. But on Regulation A is actually it actually takes about 4 to 5, up to 6 to 7 months to get approved to be able to do a Regulation A offering. And so you can't really use Regulation A when it comes to acquisitions on multifamily unless you have unless you've already put the fund together and you're going to put multiple assets in that fund, right? But if you're like most syndicators, they're going to go find the asset, open up the registrations for the offering, do a Regulation D, and raise money for it right away, right? For example, like right now, we have a deal that we are getting under contract today, right? We actually got it awarded to us last week. We got it under we're going to get it under contract today. And we've already been going back and forth negotiating the PSA. The holidays with the Labor Day holiday pushed us back a little bit, but today we're going to be signing that PSA. And we were already moving forward and putting together our Regulation D. And so later this week, we'll be able to release that offering to our investors. And it's a deal out of Charleston, South Carolina, but we had to act quick on it, right? We can't wait 6 months for the offering to be created. We have to be able to execute and close on it right now, or at least be able to raise money on it right now so that we can close on time, right? So Regulation D is where you should really focus, especially as you're getting started. If you want to do a Regulation A, you can certainly do that. And that allows you to raise even more money from some non-accredited investors as well. But just be aware that, you know, there are other stipulations with Regulation A, which we're going to cover here in a minute. We're going to go over both. We're going to go over both Regulation A and D and share with you what are the different tiers within each one of those, so that you know the differences between them. And of course, are you allowed to advertise the deal? We're going to go over that. So each one of these things, there's only one that you're not allowed to advertise, and we'll go over that with you. What are the limits that you can raise? We're going to go over that as well. And then, should you hire an attorney? Absolutely, yes, you should hire an attorney. Don't just take what I say on this webinar as fact or truth or whatever. Make sure you go and you hire a good securities attorney. And I will share with you a securities attorney that we work with, so that you can actually reach out to them if you'd like, to be able to get some help and assistance with your own stuff. I'm going to pull it up here so I can go ahead and share that with you. Otherwise, I might forget later on, unless somebody reminds me. But this is the group, and put the website on here so you can see this. This is the website we use, Kelly Clark Law. We use Dugan Kelly. You can see that here. This is the gentleman on the right. Dugan Kelly is who we use for our securities team. And so they also do they can also do the transactional side of the business as well. We don't use them for both the transactional side as well as the security side, but you can certainly do that if you chose to do that. So let me go ahead and share a different screen with you and go over this PDF with you so you can take a quick picture of it. So let me pause for just a moment here and let you take a quick picture of that. So get your phone out and just take a quick snapshot of that so you have a copy of it. All right, good. So what we're going to do today is go over both this Regulation A and Regulation D. And we're going to go through each one of these different lines. I'm going to let me pull my little annotator up here. And here we go. So you can see here, this was actually, this is just for educational purposes only. Hopefully you can see that on the screen there. This is for educational purposes only. So don't take any of this as fact or anything like that. Make sure that you go in, you hire your own securities attorney, and you get that verified, right? That would be my suggestion to you, is to do that, right? That's why it says here, this is for educational purposes only. You should always seek the advice of a securities lawyer prior to pursuing any raising effort. So make sure, because these things can change from time to time. And so even though I've done a lot of research and figured all this stuff out for you and then put it in a nice, concise format, you definitely want to make sure that you have your securities attorney on your team as well. So let's go over this first one here. This is, what is the dollar limit on the raise amount? Well, first, before we go over that first line, let's do this. So we have Regulation D and we have Regulation A. And you can see on Regulation D, there's actually two different offerings, right? There's a 506B, and then there's also a 506C right here, okay? Well, on Regulation A, yeah, it's a little bit different. You have this kind of tier 1 and you have this tier 2. And so we're going to go through each one of these tiers, but also each one of these registrations for what I would call the Bravo versus Charlie. So you'll hear me reference, a 506 Bravo or a 506 Charlie, or I might even just reference it as a Bravo or a Charlie. That just makes it so that it's easier to talk about. And that's basically just saying the 506B is a Bravo and the 506C is a Charlie. Okay. So stay with me here. All right. So what is the dollar limit on the raise amount? So on the 506B and the C, there's no limit, right? So you can raise as much as you want or as little as you want. That's one of the nice things about the Regulation D offerings is that there is no limit on the amount of money that you can raise. Now, if you jump over here to Regulation A, now we have some limits. A tier 1 is a $20 million cap and a tier 2 is a $50 million cap. Okay. So keep those in mind as you're kind of deciding which ones that you want to do. And then this next one here, which is there a limit on the dollar amount for investment size per investor? So both Regulation D's, the 506 Bravo and Charlie, there is no limit. So you can accept as little or as much as you want from each of your investors, right? On a Regulation A, there is a little bit more of a limitation there. So there's no limit on a tier 1. And just so you know, you'll notice that tier 1 has a smaller amount. There's no limit, and it's a little bit more stringent on this one, okay? And so there's a little bit more things you have to go through to be able to get this one to have no limit. But on the tier 2, there is a limit, okay? And you can see this yes, a little asterisk. So let's actually jump down here to this little asterisk line here. And the limit is on non-accredited investors only. So if you have accredited investors investing in a tier 2 Reg A offering, you do not have a limitation on the amount of money that that investor can bring in. However, if they are non-accredited, then no more than 10% of their annual income or net worth, whichever one is greater, right? So that only 10% of their net worth or annual income can they invest in your offering. So if they make $50,000 a year, the most that they can invest is $5,000. However, if their net worth is say $150,000, then they can invest up to $15,000 in that offering. So it's limited based on their net worth or their annual income. Okay. All right. So let's go to this next one here. Are you allowed to use general solicitation or what would be called advertising for the offering? On a 506B, the answer is a big fat no. So if you do a 506B or Bravo offering, you are not allowed to advertise that deal. You can only bring it to people you have a prior existing relationship with. And you'll see that that's actually the answer down here. Does it require a prior existing relationship with the investor? So the only one that requires this prior existing relationship is this 506C offering. It does require that pre-existing relationship. And that's one of the, well, that's not the only reason, but that's because you cannot advertise, you have to have that prior existing relationship. And the reason why that's in place is because it's not a pre-approved offering. You are putting together the offering yourself. There's no pre-approval process, but they do limit you on the number of sophisticated or non-accredited investors that you can bring in. Now, all the other ones you can see, yes, you can advertise them. You can advertise a Charlie, a tier 1, or a tier 2 Reg A offering. Now, you can see also that there is also no prior existing relationship needed on any of these other ones. Okay. Now, how many accredited investors are you allowed to have in each one of these? Well, let's step back for just a moment and think about this. You'll notice this trend throughout this entire presentation today that once you become an accredited investor, the SEC does not care about you anymore. The SEC is only there to protect the little guy, the person who has not reached the accredited investor status. Because they basically say that if you don't have if you're not an accredited investor, you are likely not smart enough to be able to make these decisions on your own. So we're going to go in there and help you out, right? And I don't want to necessarily say you're not smart enough. You're ignorant, right? Which doesn't mean which ignorance is not a bad thing, right? Because when you first started learning about multifamily, you were ignorant about it, right? But then you learned about it and educated yourself. And so that's how the SEC looks at non-accredited investors. They think, okay, well, if there's people trying to raise money from non-accredited investors, we want to protect those non-accredited investors for making decisions on investments that they don't really understand. They don't really have a full grasp on. And so we're going to help them make those decisions and kind of hold their hand. So you can see here how many accredited investors are allowed. Every single one of these things, you can have an unlimited amount of accredited investors. They don't care about accredited investors. Once you've reached that status, you're golden, right? Now, the next thing here is do you need to accredit or do the accredited investors need to be verified? So in what's interesting here is in Regulation A, because it's a pre-approved offering, there is no requirement for accredited investors to be verified, right? It's basically just self-reporting their net worth and their annual income, and they can become an accredited investor. There's no third party or anything like that. With a Bravo offering, they self-certify, basically sign in a form stating their net worth and their income, or that they actually are an accredited or a non-accredited, they are an accredited investor. So it's self-certified. Now, the reason why it's self-certified is because if you, as the promoter or the operator, have a prior existing relationship with them, right? If you have this prior existing relationship with them, then you should already know them well enough to know whether or not they actually are an accredited investor or not. So you can trust whether or not you can trust their self-certification. Now, the 506 Charlie here, you are required to use a third party in order to bring on those accredited investors. And there's services out there. We actually use one called Parallel Markets. Let me see if I can actually find this website for you. We actually just recently switched to them because we were having some problems with our other one. And you can go reach out to them and figure this out. Let me go back to this screen over here because hold on just a moment. There it is. All right, so here is the link to this website. It's called parallelmarkets.com, and they do self-certification for accreditations. And so you basically just send your investor over to a link that they'll give you that's related to your offering, and they'll get you set up so that you can actually get them accredited. So then it's usually pretty quick. So like a couple business days, or even I think they actually do a 24-hour turnaround if you choose to do something like that. So you can certainly do that as well. All right, so are non-accredited investors allowed in these offerings? This is where it gets a little bit interesting. So in the 506 Bravo, you're allowed to have non-accredited, but they must be sophisticated. Now, some people get confused with this because they go, oh, I could bring on some sophisticated investors. Well, according to the SEC, if you're an accredited investor, you are a sophisticated investor. So it's not necessarily that just sophisticated investors are brought on, but you can have non-accredited, but yet sophisticated investors. Okay, so there's a big distinction there. But a sophisticated investor is somebody who has the financial business and knowledge and wherewithal to be able to, not let's say wherewithal, but the knowledge to be able to understand the merits and the risks of the investment that they're getting ready to invest in, right? And so it's a little bit subjective. And yes, they do self-certify this. But again, you should know them because of your prior existing relationship with them as to whether or not they would be sophisticated enough to be a sophisticated, non-accredited investor. So you can bring on sophisticated or non-accredited sophisticated investors on these. And on a 506 Charlie, it's a big no-no. You are not allowed to bring on non-accredited investors. You could only bring on a 506 Charlie accredited investors only. And with our offerings that we do at passiveinvesting.com, we only do 506 Charlies. I say only. I mean, in the past, we have done some 506 Bravos. And when we first got started, we did the Bravos. And occasionally, maybe once a year, we'll squeeze in a Bravo. But most of our investment offerings are going to be a 506 Charlie that we actually put together. Now, let's talk about Regulation A. Yes, you can bring on these non-accredited investors. Just like we talked about earlier, you can bring on those non-accredited investors. So the answer to that question is yes. But again, remember, in the tier 2, there's a limit. So yes, you can bring on the non-accredited investors where they have this 10% greater of annual income or net worth in order to be able to invest. If non-accredited investors are allowed, is there a limit? Yes, the Bravo can only accept up to 35 non-accredited, but yet sophisticated investors. There is no limit on the other ones because, there's no limit. Excuse me. Let me back this up. I did that line a little bit wrong. So there's no limit on the tier 1 or the tier 2 for Regulation A, but then you can see this line here, which means that it doesn't really apply to this one because there are no non-accredited investors in a 506 Charlie. Now let's talk about these filing requirements. Okay. We're going to talk about the SEC filing requirement, which is going to be the Form D. So once you put the offering together and you close on the asset within 15 days of that offering, you must file the Form D. Again, if you have a good securities attorney, they're going to take care of all that for you, so you don't have to worry about it. On the Regulation A, You just have to be able to submit the forms to get the pre-approval before you can go out with your offering. So this is why nobody usually does a Regulation A for the multifamily side of things. Now, let's talk about the state filing requirements. These are what they call the blue sky laws, okay? So let me actually just do this so you don't forget about this. I'm just going to write the word blue here so you can actually see this. It's actually called blue sky laws. And the blue sky laws are basically laws that state that if you raise money from an investor within a particular state, you must file in that state to let them know. Hold on. You must file. I had somebody ask a question here. So, all right. So you must file in each state that you raise money from an investor. So and it depends on the home state of that investor. So if it's an entity and their home state is Wyoming or Delaware, then that's the state you have to file in. If it is an individual and they're located in a particular state, if the offering or the asset is located in, say, South Carolina, but you're raising money from investors all over the country, each one of those states that you have an investor in, you must file a form and register with those local state securities commissions and what they call the blue sky laws. And the fees to register vary by state. So I would say on our offerings, it usually ranges between $5,000 on the low end, upwards to $15,000 to $20,000 to be able to register across the various states of investors that we're taking money, that we're receiving money from. Okay. Again, that's something that your attorney does for you. You don't have to mess with it. You give them your investor roster. He takes that or she takes that and goes and does the filings like they're supposed to. But it all varies by state. So there's not really any consistencies with it. But there are certain states like California and New York that are more expensive because of course they just like to charge more, right? And then, of course, these ongoing reporting requirements. There are no ongoing reporting requirements for Regulation D offerings. However, in Regulation A, there is one for Regulation A Tier 2. And then there's no reporting requirements for a Tier 1. So hopefully this chart is helpful for you in kind of understanding a little bit about these different offerings and how they work. I'm going to open up for some questions here. I know there's a couple of them that have already come in here, so I'm going to leave this thing on the screen here in case you wanted to take some more pictures here and get a copy of this. This is the type of stuff that we go over and is actually discussed at our more things like this detailed stuff that happens at our summit, right? Our Multifamily Investor Nation Summit. And we actually have, for those of you who don't know about it, we actually have an event coming up next week. It's going to be a live in-person event right here in Columbia, South Carolina. So I know some of you jumped on after I mentioned it earlier, so I'll just type it on here. You can go to the kingdomrei.com/workshop and you can figure out, it's the kingdomrei.com/workshop. But you can click that link and find out more information about that event coming up next week. It's all about capital raising. And we're going to be giving out some handouts like this and also go into a lot of the different nuances about how we are able to raise money. And we have just, even year to date in 2021, we have raised over $102 million from our investors for the different assets we've closed this year. And we're on track to do probably close to about $150 to $160 million between now and the end of the year. So if you want to learn from us and how we're doing it here at passiveinvesting.com, we'd love to have you there. There's also going to be some other high-level people there, which is why we charge $5,000 for the event. So if you want to come to that event, go to the website, fill out the form, register. I promise you won't regret it. And I'll also back it up with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you pay for it, you fly out here, you come to the event and you just say, this was terrible, I don't like it, I'll give you your money back, right? We're going to have a lot of fun here. You can meet potential partners for your next offerings, not just from the passive side, but really from the active side, to be able to find people that you might be able to partner with to create your own group. Which would be great because there's going to be some high level people here, and that they're going to be high level because they're paying $5,000 to be here, right? So make sure that you pay attention at that event as well when you come down and visit with us. Love to be able to meet you one-on-one in person. I know a lot of you have been following us on these webinars for quite some time. So let me go ahead and go through some of these questions here. Keith is asking a question. I'm considering the enrolling in your upcoming self-storage 2-day seminar, but I need to get the schedule of events. In PST, so I can see my schedule will permit to attend. I am very excited. I'll type the email for Melissa in the chat box here, so you can just reach out to her directly and she can try to help you out with that. So let me send that to her and she can get you in contact with the right person. Why the limit of 99 investors in Regulation D? Well, I'm not sure where you came up with that, but there's no limit of 99 investors in a Regulation D offering. It doesn't trigger more compliance or anything like that or audits. So I'm not really sure where that came from, but I didn't say it. And if I did, I didn't mean to say it. There's no limit to the number of investors that you can bring in to a Regulation D offering. We have offerings right now that we've done with Regulation D that have as little as 35 investors in them and upwards to 235 investors in them. So there is no limit to the number of investors inside of a Regulation D offering. All right. I thought there is a maximum amount of passive investor or LP can contribute to a single deal due to lender requiring more information for the investor to be a guarantor. Your chart shows no limit. Well, Kevin, this actually has nothing to do with the lenders at all. This is all about the securities rules and regulations. So according to the securities rules and regulations, there is no limit. However, what you're referring to is that some lenders, most lenders, will require a person to be underwritten with the loan if they own more than 20% of the asset. So if a person invests a large amount of money and they end up owning more than 20% of the asset, then yes, that will trigger the lender to want to underwrite that person with the loan. However, if all of your investors are owning 20% or less, then they are not being underwritten with the loan. And so there's no worry about that. So that limit is set by the lenders, not the SEC. A good point to bring up there, Kevin. Let's see. Can you give people a finder's fee for finding accredited investors for a deal? So the answer to that question is yes, but you must do it through what's called a broker dealer. So they must be associated with or be a registered representative of a broker dealer in order to give them a kind of finder's fee, if you will, in order to find accredited investors for a deal. So there's definitely some rules and regulations and some compliance things when it comes to raising money. And we've actually done some capital raising webinars. So if you go to our YouTube channel and you type in raising capital I don't know exactly what it is, but if you type in raising capital, you'll be able to find some additional webinars that we've done on capital raising, where we go into some of those different nuances as to how to bring on people to be able to help you raise more money for your deals. Let's see. So why or when, this is another question from Kevin here. So why or when would a sponsor use a Reg A offering for a multifamily syndication? So if they have in their network a large number of non-accredited investors that they want to be able to invest in their offerings, then they would probably do a Regulation A offering. Now, one of the things I didn't mention just yet is the costs associated with each one of these. So in a Regulation D offering here, the Regulation D offering is going to cost $10,000 to $15,000, maybe $20,000 to be able to put the offering together. Now, that's not including the blue sky laws, and those are going to be the same for both, depending on which one you do. So those don't really matter. But the blue sky laws, like I mentioned earlier, can be as little as a couple thousand to upwards to maybe 10 to 15,000 as well. But just the Regulation D offering itself is about 10 to 15,000, maybe upwards to 20,000 for the attorneys to put it together for you. And then the Regulation A offering over here is about $50,000 to $75,000. So it's a lot more money because there's a lot more time that the attorney has to put into it to be able to get that offering off the ground. Okay. And so you have this Regulation A that costs more money, but if you have a lot of non-accredited investors in your network, if you will, then maybe you want to put together a kind of smaller tier 1 or a tier 2 $50 million fund to be able to raise money from those non-accredited investors. So that's, and maybe you also want to put it together to be able to diversify it a little bit more, right? You want to be able to put it in, put multiple assets under one fund. You can do it through that Regulation A offering, and you can open it up to some of these non-accredited investors and have no limitation to it. So that's, the main reason why you would do a Reg A versus not, because there's less scrutiny and you don't have to do accreditation verifications or anything like that as well. So. All right. So I don't see any other questions coming in. Hopefully I covered things very well for you. For those of you who have already registered for the event next week, Thank you so much. Appreciate that. We're getting full. Not going to be too many more seats left soon, but if you want to go there and register, you can go to thekingdomrei.com/workshop and find out about that event coming up next week. Look forward to seeing you there in person and teaching you. And for those of you who are eager to know what next week's topic is, let me pull that up here and see what next week's topic is. Let me refresh my screen here. I need to clear all these drawings. It is going to be on understanding the rent roll and T12 reports for apartment syndication. So you can click on that link right there in the chat box and register for next week's seminar or webinar. That's going to be on understanding the rent roll and T12 reports. We're going to have Danny Randazzo on our team, going to be able to be here and helping you out with that particular topic. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. We'll send out the recording to this webinar here shortly and look forward to seeing you back here next week.